Hi, guys. All right, welcome to week 3. We're going to jump in. Always, I'm going to start out the same way every time. I realized that I was saying the same thing that I always say, which is fine. It's totally fine, right? You're good. I'm good. We don't have to worry about that. So, we're going to get right into today's material. I'm going to be discussing critical thinking. And the story for this week is The Lottery by Shirley Jackson. If you're familiar with it, you know what's coming. If you're not, get ready. I wish I had like a seatbelt here. I can be like, strap in. But anyway, enough about that. Get to that part a little bit later. But I am going to go ahead and share the screen, get us into the PowerPoint presentation. I'm the PowerPoint queen. I think you know that. We were just 3 weeks in. I like to have my backup here. I like to have awesome things for you to look at while I am talking. So here we are. I wanted to start this week by saying this because some of you might have been feeling after having read Bullet in the Brain last week and then having to answer those questions, some of you might be like, oh, it's hard. I don't know how to dissect a piece of literature. This is overwhelming. I get it. I totally get it. I used to be one of you until I learned this process. And once I learned this process and got comfortable with this process, now dissecting and understanding pieces of literature, of writing, arguments in general, it's not a difficult task for me because I know how to dig in. So that's the whole intent of these worksheets, is to assist us to dig in to the information and to understand the argument inside. It starts with truly knowing the author. We have to know about the person in order to dig in. So we're going to talk some more today about understanding critical thinking. I did mention it some last week, but we're going to dig into quite a bit more information today. Thinking for yourself. I found this article and I think it's fantastic. So I'm going to walk us through it. It is called What is Critical Thinking? Definition and Examples. It's put out by Ewan Ryan. We looked this up in class this last semester, how to say that last name or that first name. It's Ewan. But he published this on May the 30th of 2022. So it's fairly recent. All right. So it's up to date. It's current information. So what is critical thinking? Critical thinking is the ability to effectively analyze information and form a judgment. To think critically, you must be aware of your own biases and assumptions when encountering information and apply consistent standards when evaluating sources. Critical thinking helps you to 1. Identify credible sources. 2. Evaluate and respond to arguments. 3. Assess alternative viewpoints. And 4. Test hypotheses against relevant criteria. So critical thinking involves these things. So this is in addition to what we discussed last week. We always want to identify credible sources, evaluate and respond, which means we have to take a look at opposing perspectives. We have to evaluate them so that we can respond to them. We have to assess them and then test not only our arguments, but the arguments of others so that we can draw strong conclusions. This information is from the Scribr site, Scribr.com. I did put down here at the bottom a link for you to this article. Why is critical thinking important? Critical thinking is important for making judgments about sources of information and forming your own arguments. It emphasizes a rational, objective, and self-aware approach that can help you to identify credible sources and strengthen your conclusions. Critical thinking is important in all disciplines and throughout all stages of the research process. The types of evidence used in the sciences and in the humanities may differ, but critical thinking skills are relevant to both. In academic writing, Critical thinking can help you to determine whether a source is free from research bias. That would never happen, right? People don't put their biases into their research. Yes, they provides evidence to support its research findings and considers alternative viewpoints. If you're encountering an argument that does not consider alternative viewpoints, run. Don't spend time with that argument. Don't consider that argument. It's not a true argument. A true argument always considers opposing viewpoints. Outside of academia, critical thinking goes hand in hand with information literacy to help you form opinions and rationally and engage independently and critically with popular media. We need to be applying critical thinking processes to everything that we encounter, especially from the news, from politicians, from celebrities, things that we see on television, doctors even. Ask where their money comes from. Who's paying them? Who's funding that hospital? Do politics play a part? Do they not? We need to not be naive. Critical thinking examples. Critical thinking can help you to identify reliable sources of information that you can cite in your research paper. It can also help you guide your own research methods and inform your own arguments. Outside of academia, critical thinking can help you to be aware of both your own and others' biases and assumptions. Looking at biases and assumptions is an essential aspect of critical thinking. We have to be able to recognize when someone is coming into an argument with assumptions and with biases. They are set, leaning into their opinion strongly based on loose and flimsy evidence. We have to know that that happens. So here are some examples. Example 1, good critical thinking in an academic context. You're writing a research paper on recent innovations in diabetes treatments. You read an article that claims positive results for an at-home treatment that was recently developed. The results of the research are impressive and the treatment seems to be groundbreaking. However, when you compare the findings of the study with other current research, you determine that the results seem improbable. You analyze the paper again, consulting the sources it cites. You notice that the research was funded by the pharmaceutical company that created the treatment. Because of this, you view its results skeptically and determine that more independent research is necessary to confirm or refute them. Oh, think that doesn't actually happen in the real world? Yes, of course it does. Where does the money flow? Follow the money. Who's influential at the top? What are their political leanings? Where's the money going? Always follow that. You notice that the research was funded by the pharmaceutical company that created the treatment. Here, do this research that proves that our medicine is the best choice. Think that doesn't happen? Absolutely, it does. Example number 2, poor critical thinking in an academic context. You're researching a paper on the impact wireless technology has had on developing countries that previously did not have large-scale communications infrastructure. Read an article that seems to confirm your hypothesis. The impact is mainly positive. Rather than evaluating the research methodology, you accept the findings uncritically. In this instance, you have failed to engage with the source critically and have displayed confirmation bias in accepting its conclusions based on a belief that you already held. So you go into the research already having a belief that's based on not actual evidence. So when you read information, it backs up your bias and you go, oh, yep, it's true. It's totally true. I know it's true because it backs up what I already believed. That's not strong research. We need to confront our biases, be aware of them, and look for information despite them. Non-academic examples. Good critical thinking in a non-academic context, right? You are thinking about upgrading the security features at your home. You want to install an alarm system, but are unsure what brand is the most reliable. You search home improvement websites and find a 5-star review article of an alarm system. The review is positive. The alarm seems to install, easy to install and reliable. However, you decide to compare this review article with consumer reviews on a different site. You find that these reviews are not as positive. Some customers have had problems installing the alarm, and some have noted that it activates for no apparent reason. You revisit the original review article. You notice the words "sponsored text" appear in small print under the article title. Based on this, you conclude that the review is advertising and is therefore not an unbiased source. We need to understand and know that oftentimes reviews that are left on products are written by the company. Pay attention to the dates when those were uploaded. Like when you're on social media, you're on Facebook or Instagram or one of those other sites, and all of a sudden there's an ad that pops up for something that you're interested in. And so go read the comment thread. Pay attention to the dates when all those comments were posted. They'll all be within the last week or two, and they'll all be like the same day. No, that was purely created by somebody trying to scam you out of some money. Don't fall for it. Oh, poor critical thinking in a non-academic context. You support a candidate in an upcoming election. You visit an online news site affiliated with their political party and read an article that criticizes their opponent. The article claims that the opponent is inexperienced in politics. You accept this without evidence because it fits your preconceptions about the opponent. In this case, you failed to look critically at the claims of the article and check whether they were backed up with evidence because you were already inclined to. Think this doesn't happen? This happens every day. Every day. You support a candidate just because they're a Democrat or just because they're a Republican, and you know nothing about them or their record. You hear people say orange man bad, and you jump on the hate Trump bandwagon. Have you actually looked at his record? And you're going to be like, oh, well, he said this about women. I didn't say anything about that. I'm talking about his political record. Have you looked at the fact that he has supported Black businessmen for years? Has been friends with them for years? Oprah Winfrey in the 80s had him on her show and she begged him to run for president. Now she's going to deny that now, but the video is out there. You can watch interviews of the man from the 80s where he's talking about his perspectives on politics and his perspectives on business. He says the same things then that he says now. He has not changed. Now, you do the same thing with our current president. All over the map. His perspectives 30, 40 plus years ago aren't what he espouses now. Follow the money. We have to do actual research, and this is at the local level, the state level, the federal level. We're putting these people into positions of power. We should know about them. We should know what they stand for. Who's supporting them? Who's paying them? And what do those people believe? Very important to not just blindly go with what your party tells you should do. Very important. Some of you need to understand and know too that there's more than just two political parties in this country. Republicans and Democrats seem to be the only ones that really get talked about, but I don't know. Look up libertarians, see what you think. I'll say it again. Libertarians. See what you think about their beliefs. Some are a little more liberal leaning than others. Some are a little more conservative leaning than others. That might be a good idea for you to look that up. In this case, though, the situation here, We just go with what the media tells us. We go with what a friend told us. We go with what something we read that just backed up our own bias. And remember, a bias is based on loose and flimsy evidence. And we're like, yep, it's true. No. If you only hear one side of the story, you have no understanding at all. Oh, I love that. That's one to like print out and put on our mirrors so we see it every day. If you only hear one side, you have no understanding at all. So, not from the article. Regardless of how you or I feel about it, this reporter is skewing the truth. So this is a NBC reporter who is at some NASCAR event. This was, 2 years ago? Yes, 2 years ago, October the 3rd. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and play this for you, but let me get the sound shared here so you'll see what my computer's doing. All right, so here we go. Let's listen to this reporter skewing the truth.
Thank you to all of our partners. Oh my God, it's just such an unbelievable moment.
Brandon, you also told me, as you can hear the chants from the crowd, let's go, Brandon. Brandon, you told me you were going to kind of...
Let's go, Brandon. I know you've heard of that. People ran with it, and you might not have understood where it came from, but that's where it came from. That reporter knew what those people were saying, but she needed to change it. She needed to change the narrative. And so she said that they were saying, let's go, Brandon. And there were people that believed that. There were people that said, yeah, she's right. They are saying, let's go, Brandon, because it was an NBC reporter that said so. Well, the news doesn't lie. The news doesn't skew the truth. Yes, they do. Yes, they do. We need to be aware of it. Here's another example. Reuters posted this picture and said Ukraine says it has repelled Russian incursion in the Sumy region with these weapons. Oh, those are not automatic rifles. Those are paintball guns. So, just because the news posts something doesn't mean it's right, doesn't mean it's accurate. You need to do your own research. Dig into other sites beyond the mainstream media who's being paid by billionaires to push their own agendas. Both sides of the fence. I'm just saying, billionaires are running things. You need to know that. How to think critically. There is no single way to think critically. How you engage with information will depend on the type of source that you're using and the information that you need. However, you engage with sources in a systematic and critical way by asking certain questions when you encounter information, like the crap test. Oh my gosh, this is sincerely about my favorite thing today in this information. The crap test. These questions focus on currency, relevancy, authority, accuracy, and purpose. So when encountering information, when encountering an argument, you need to ask these questions. Who is the author? Are they an expert in their field? What do they say? Is their argument clear? Can you summarize it? When did they say this? Is the source current? Where is the information published? Is it an academic article? Is it peer-reviewed? Why did the author publish it? And what is their motivation? That's an important one. What is their motivation? How do they make their argument? Literary elements, logos, pathos, ethos, structure, no structure. How do they make their argument? Does it rely on opinion, speculation, or appeals to emotion? Do they address alternative arguments? Is it full of logical fallacies? Is your source crap? Yes. Current, relevant, authoritative, accurate, and purpose-driven. Examine your sources in that way. Isn't that great information? I love that. I think that's so cool. All right. Critical thinking also involves being aware of your own biases, not only those of others. When you make an argument or draw your own conclusions, you can ask similar questions about your own writing. Am I only considering evidence that supports my preconceptions? We have to get really honest with ourselves. I have to do that when I'm putting together this information for you. I work hard to not interject my own political thoughts into these lessons. It's not fair for me to come at you with my own biases. Now, it's not biased for me to say to you, you should check out the Libertarian Agenda. They're not Republicans or Democrats. They are free thinkers. They think for themselves. They are all about critical thinking. Just saying. Is my argument expressed clearly and backed up with credible sources? Would I be convinced by this argument coming from someone else? If someone else brought me the same message when I listen? Sometimes that's true. Sometimes it's just the source that makes us go, no, thanks. Then someone else says the same thing and you're like, I know, right? Credibility is huge. Credibility is important. We need to make sure that our credibility is strong. But then we also need to be looking at the credibility of those who are making arguments around us. So thank you, Ewan, for all of that fantastic information in that article. That's Ewan's picture down there in the bottom of the screen. According to Scribner, the textbook, internet research, and me, critical thinking is the ability to effectively analyze information and form a judgment. To think critically, you must be aware of your own biases and assumptions when encountering information and apply consistent standards when evaluating sources. Critical thinking skills help you to, this is a reminder, identify credible sources, evaluate and respond to arguments, assess alternative viewpoints, and test hypotheses against relevant criteria. Are your sources crap? Be looking at that. We do this critical thinking by using tools, logos, pathos, and ethos. The rhetorical triangle. We need to get very comfortable with looking for logos, pathos, and ethos inside any argument, whether it is spoken or written or viewed on a screen. Ethos is credibility and ethics. Pathos is emotions and feelings, and logos is logic and reasons. So over here on the right, a little bit more, logos, rational, stress evidence, and explain the process of thought. Ethos, explain your views and how you think. Acknowledge that they might think differently. This is credibility. Pathos, engage your readers' emotions. You might use emotional language, but don't go overboard on venting your own passions. This is emotion related. So let's take a deeper dive into logos, pathos, and ethos. Logos is the use of logic and facts to persuade. While it may be the most boring, it is also the most important thing to look for when evaluating resources. This makes up the core of a persuasive argument, or at least it should. Does the author use facts and statistics? If so, do they support the accuracy of those facts by providing citations so that they can be checked? Can you verify the information that's being used? Of course, it's important that the author includes facts, but do they also clearly explain how those facts support their claim? When writing, be sure to explain each step of your argument, and when evaluating other people's arguments, be sure to see if there are any gaps in theirs. Very important to find logos in any argument. Pathos. Pathos is the technique where the author tries to persuade the reader or listener with emotion. While a powerful persuasive technique, it often exposes the author's bias and can be a clue to figuring out what the author's purpose is. When evaluating a resource to determine whether it has been useful information, it's important to separate the author's emotional appeals from their central argument. An important point to consider is the author putting forward their own emotions, or are they choosing what they think will best manipulate you? Emotion is used to manipulate. We want our readers to feel, we want to pull them into our argument. And so we do that with pathos. Now, I just wanted to point out here, any of you that are Star Trek fans, you know what I'm doing here. I have discovered that the more I teach or the longer I teach, there are less and less and fewer students who know what Star Trek is. Blows my brain. So the original Star Trek had this character named Spock, and Spock is all logic. He has no emotions. So he's the voice of reason on the show. He is all logos. And so that's why I put him here. And now on the pathos page, again, if you're a Star Trek fan, you get it. This is Captain Kirk. Captain Kirk is all about emotion. He's very charming. He's super reactive. He is all emotion. And so Spock is like his right-hand guy, and he relies heavily on Spock's logic to get them through situations. Now, ethos. Ethos is where the author or speaker attempts to establish their authority and credibility. Do the authors provide their credentials? If not, why? Are they experts in the field? Do they have authority? Do they reference credible sources and provide the information needed for the audience to find and check them? Do they demonstrate a concern for accuracy? Ethos, credibility. Now, this is Bones from the more recent movies. This is not Bones from the original Star Trek. So, but he's the doctor on the Enterprise, and he often says things like, "Trust me, I'm a doctor." But here, damn it, man, I'm a doctor, not a physicist. But he's always making statements of ethos, establishing credibility, authority, if you will. So he's the ethos on the show. And I thought that was hilarious when I realized that Star Trek portrays logos, pathos, and ethos in perfect detail. So I found this TED Talk, and I am going to play this for you. I'm going to share this with you. I think this is an interesting piece. And so we're going to watch this, and then I'm going to talk about it a little bit.
How do you get what you want using just your words? Aristotle set out to answer exactly that question over 2,000 years ago with a treatise on rhetoric. Rhetoric, according to Aristotle, is the art of seeing the available means of persuasion. And today we apply it to any form of communication. Aristotle focused on oration, though, and he described 3 types of persuasive speech. Forensic or judicial rhetoric establishes facts and judgments about the past, similar to detectives at a crime scene. Epidictic or demonstrative rhetoric makes a proclamation about the present situation, as in wedding speeches. But the way to accomplish change is through deliberative rhetoric, or symboleticon. Rather than the past or the present, deliberative rhetoric focuses on the future. It's the rhetoric of politicians debating a new law by imagining what effect it might have. Like when Ronald Reagan warned that the introduction of Medicare would lead to a socialist future spent telling our children and our children's children what it once was like in America when men were free. But it's also the rhetoric of activists urging change, such as Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream that his children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. In both cases, the speakers present their audience with a possible future and try to enlist their help in avoiding or achieving it. But what makes for good deliberative rhetoric besides the future tense? According to Aristotle, there are 3 persuasive appeals: ethos, logos, and pathos. Ethos is how you convince an audience of your credibility. Winston Churchill began his 1941 address to the US Congress by declaring, "I have been in full harmony all my life with the tides which have flowed on both sides of the Atlantic against privilege and monopoly," thus highlighting his virtue as someone committed to democracy. Much earlier, in his defense of the poet Archias, Roman consul Cicero appealed to his own practical wisdom and expertise as a politician. Drawn from my study of the liberal sciences and from that careful training to which I admit that at no part of my life I have ever been disinclined. And finally, you can demonstrate disinterest, or that you're not motivated by personal gain. Logos is the use of logic and reason. This method can employ rhetorical devices such as analogies, examples, and citations of research or statistics. But it's not just facts and figures. It's also the structure and content of the speech itself. The point is to use factual knowledge to convince the audience, as in Sojourner Truth's argument for women's rights. "I have as much muscle as any man, and can do as much work as any man. I have plowed and reaped and husked and chopped and mowed, and can any man do more than that?" Unfortunately, speakers can also manipulate people with false information that the audience thinks is true, such as the debunked but still widely believed claim that vaccines cause autism. And finally, pathos appeals to emotion, and in our age of mass media, it's often the most effective mode. Pathos is neither inherently good nor bad, but it may be irrational and unpredictable. It can just as easily rally people for peace as incite them to war. Most advertising, from beauty products that promise to relieve our physical insecurities to cars that make us feel powerful, relies on pathos. Aristotle's rhetorical appeals still remain powerful tools today. But deciding which of them to use is a matter of knowing your audience and purpose, as well as the right place and time. And perhaps just as important is being able to notice when these same methods of persuasion are being used on you.
Excellent. For the most part, I really love that video. For the most part. However, there is something that she says in there that I have questions about, and I have observations. And it's really funny because I showed this video in class a few years ago. And let me open this back up. I showed this in class a few years ago, and I stopped it at the point where I go to one of the things that she says. And I had a student take what I said, not fully listen to me, because the student came into this idea or thought with their own bias and got immediately angry, got on Rate My Professor, and left a 1-star review and just this wretched message about me and my opinions, and that I was pushing them in the classroom. Now, you need to know that on Rate My Professor, your professors have an account, and we have the capacity to respond to any of your comments. And this was only 2 weeks into the semester, 3 weeks into the semester, so I knew that it was a current student who did it. And this was an in-person class. It wasn't hard to figure out who wrote it. But I did. I went ahead and I left a review or a response. And I said what I actually said in class was. And I wrote out exactly what I actually said in class. And then, I let it sit there because I have a right to produce my side of the argument. And it was interesting because the semester wore on and the student relaxed with me. Do you know that review disappeared off of Rate My Professor? Listen to the other side. Hear what they're saying. Look for evidence. Take out your own biases, right? So when I watch this TED Talk, there's a particular thing that this woman says that makes me go, because I have logical questions. So here we go. Oh, it's not popping up. Oh, hold on just a second. I have to do something real quick. I have something popping up on my computer that I have to take care of quickly. You might be able to see it in my glasses in the reflection. I'm trying to take care of it. It's just not wanting me to. Oh, here we go. All right. 2. All right. Done. Yeah. Well, mostly done. I was waiting for this to pop up. I've been like anticipating this happening. It's the previous recorded lecture is converting to my computer. So if you're wondering, what is she doing? That's what it was. All right, so this moves us forward now. We're going to, wait, that's not where we need to be. I know you guys can't see what I'm seeing, but I'm seeing the wrong thing. How do I get out of that? Let's get back to the PowerPoint. Here we go. Okay, now we're all in the same place. Now, here are my questions. Now that I'm like completely somewhat off topic. What is it that she says in there that make me go? So she says that vaccines causing autism is debunked. All right. So do vaccines cause autism? Do vaccines not cause autism? Here are my observations. And this is from research. This is from the CDC. There is a rise in autism rates. Writing in the weekly journal, MMWR, CDC researchers report that autism rates in the United States, not in other countries, in the United States, increased from 1 in 150 children in 2000 to 1 in 54 children in 2016. And the rate now stands a year and a half ago, at 1 in 44 children. That's an interesting observation. Here's a question that I have. Anybody allergic to penicillin? My husband's allergic to penicillin. I know other people that are allergic to penicillin. I personally, myself, I can't take Percocet. I have a reaction to Percocet. I know some people who can't take ibuprofen because they have reactions to it. So not everyone can take every medication. See where I'm going with this? Not everyone's body can handle every medication. We have reactions to them. They have reactions. Right? We know that because anytime you see a commercial on television for any new pharmaceutical product, they also list out, all of the possible reactions that it might have, diarrhea, vomiting, death. That's at the very end of all of the fine print. Oh, pharmaceuticals. Don't you love them? So anyway, it's an observation. I know people who can't take certain medications because they have a physical reaction to them. They ask you every time you go to the doctor, are you allergic to medications? Right? There's my Tylenol versus Percocet. So is it not true then that what my body can take or handle, maybe yours can't, and vice versa? I can take penicillin. Doesn't bother me at all. My husband can't. What my body can take, maybe your body can't. Okay, that is a fact. It is a fact. That's even why doctors ask you, the nurses ask you, are you allergic to any medications? This is a fact. Observation. Now, it is also a fact, according to medical sites. I particularly found this on libby.co.uk. Some immune systems are not fully developed until a child is 8 years old. Well, how many vaccines have we given to a child before they are 8 years old when their immune systems may not be fully developed yet? This is the NIH. Thank you, Anthony Fauci. The brain's many functions do not develop at the same time, nor do their developmental patterns follow the same time frame. We don't know that much about the brain. We honestly do not know that much about the brain. We do know that medications cause reactions, and yet for some reason we think we can put these chemicals into babies when they are brand new and not have consequences. Wow. I observe these things as the mother of 2 children on the autism spectrum. So that 1 in 44, 2 of them are mine. It's interesting, isn't it? When you break it down, you think about it, you consider, I'm just observing, I'm making observations. I've done some research. I also have life experience research. It's very unusual for 2 children in the same family to be diagnosed Asperger's syndrome. So just posing some questions. What makes us think that that baby's body is ready for those chemicals? And they want to say, oh, it's just the dead or the living bacteria that we're putting. No, look at the ingredients in your vaccines now. They've added a lot of chemicals to them. Make sure you know what's being put into yourself and into your children. Just do your own research, is what I'm saying. Look it up for yourself. And when someone tells you, oh, vaccines have been debunked, say, give me your research. Give me your information. And then let me share with you my own. And let's have a conversation about that, shall we? So, the saying, just because you watch a video that's a TED Talk doesn't mean it's completely accurate. Am I spreading disinformation by asking questions and doing my own research? Am I? Or am I asking you to think critically for yourself? Now, there are some who are going to tell you that's disinformation because it opposes what's being said by the person who created the video or by the person in power by that political party. If it opposes, they're going to say, it's disinformation. Is it disinformation or is it me just going, I have questions? Something doesn't smell right here. It's fun, isn't it? We have to find balance in order to be critical thinkers. There has to be a balance. Logos, ethos, pathos. It cannot be all pathos. And oftentimes that's what you're going to encounter. People who are in sales, politicians, they love pathos. Preachers love pathos. Let's get the crowd riled up. Let's get them feeling. Let's get them laughing. Let's get them crying. Then let's ask them for money. I'm telling you, this is a technique that is taught. Some more information here. Identifying rhetorical strategies, logos, pathos, and ethos. Rhetoric is the art of using language persuasively and effectively. Now, why would that be an art if it wasn't going to be used for someone against someone else? I need you to pay me money. Here's how I'm going to do it. Here's how I'm going to appeal to you on TV commercials and election campaigns, in a classroom, in a church, any kind of setting, in a movie, a TV show, across the board. This is happening to us. So how are they doing it? How are they using logos, pathos, and ethos? Well, here, I'm not going to read all of this. You guys can pull this chart up off the PowerPoint and read through it yourself. Or you can read through it right now while I'm talking. There's a link down there at the bottom where it's from, Identifying Rhetorical Strategies at Secondary Instruction.muskogee.k12.ga.us. So this is put out by the Muskogee tribe, but it's good. It's how is logic and emotion and credibility used in advertising? Oh yeah, it's definitely used. Look how much longer that ethos category is. And ethos is often the hardest one for us to recognize. That's because we're putting a brain block on ourselves. Read through that category and discover it's really not as difficult as you think that it is to look for credibility. How can I believe this person? So this is inescapable. Ethos, logos, and pathos are important when you are trying to persuade other people. But keep in mind, other people are trying to persuade you too. Remember, when someone gives a speech, writes a paper, or even makes a post on the internet, they have a purpose. And you need to carefully consider what that is. Argument is all around us. It's happening now. I'm making an argument that argument is everywhere and in everything, that it is inescapable. Excuse me. And it can get murky. It gets murky through logical fallacies. Sometimes an argument's attempt at logic is not logical. It is, in fact, emotionally driven. It is, and these are on purpose. Logical fallacies are often on purpose. Sometimes people don't realize they're using them. Biases will lead us to use logical fallacies. Lack of evidence and just needing to be right can lead us to use logical fallacies, but oftentimes, especially in politics, these are used on purpose. So I found this video that talks about logical fallacies, and we are going to watch this together. This is an excellent breakdown of some logical fallacies. It says 14 logical fallacies in 14 minutes. So here we go.
Hey guys, welcome back to another video. It is Clay. Today I want to talk about logical fallacies. Logical fallacies are something that are basically littering our entire world. They're interwoven into all forms of human communication. You know, things like politics, sales, religion. Anytime where you have somebody that's trying to convince a group of people of something, these fallacies seem to pop up. So a logical fallacy is a flaw in a deductive argument that basically renders an argument invalid. So a deductive argument is just a fancy word for a logical argument. It's anytime you have a premise that then leads to a conclusion. For example, it is raining outside, therefore there must be some kind of rain cloud out there. So if you flip that argument around, or almost take the opposite of that argument, it becomes a logical fallacy. If you said it is not raining outside, therefore there are no rain clouds in the sky, that would be an invalid argument, an example of a logical fallacy. But the point of the matter is, in order to have rain, you need a rain cloud. But just because you have a rain cloud doesn't necessarily mean there is rain. So there are literally hundreds of logical fallacies out there, sort of all the way from minorly irritating to like hugely frustrating. And if you're the type of person who kind of values logic, you might be annoyed by a lot of these things, even though you don't really know the names for them. So I'm going to jump into my favorite fallacies today. So the first logical fallacy I'm going to mention is the ad hominem. It's basically when a person attacks another person's character instead of responding to their argument. The point of the matter is, it's a deflection. Instead of addressing the argument or the thing they are trying to say, you are instead focusing on this essentially irrelevant information that has nothing to do with the argument itself.
Right now, today, as a candidate, he supports federal taxpayer funding for Planned Parenthood. I disagree with him on that. That's a matter of principle, and I'll tell you.
You are the single biggest liar. You probably are worse than Jeb Bush. You are the single biggest liar. Nasty guy. Now I know why he doesn't have one endorsement from any of his colleagues.
All right, John, I get to respond.
Pick from the buffet there.
He's a nasty guy.
So the next fallacy I want to talk about is the appeal to authority. And the basic idea is this: if somebody is making some kind of a claim and you question them about it, ask for some kind of proof or their reasons about why they're making this claim, and they reply with an appeal to authority or say something like, you know, this person who is an expert said so. The key to a true appeal to authority fallacy is the supposed expert has to be less than credible. So an example of this might be if somebody tells you not to talk on your cell phone because you might get a brain tumor. And when you ask them how they know that, they might say, well, my brother's a doctor and he said so. And then when you investigate, where'd your brother go to med school? Oh, it turns out he has a degree in philosophy, and although he is technically a doctor, he's not a medical doctor, and therefore he has no credibility on this issue. So the next fallacy I want to talk about is the straw figure fallacy. This is also called the straw man fallacy, but some people are trying to make it more politically correct and call it straw figure because it can be men or women. So the straw figure fallacy is essentially a pandemic in our world, and it is basically it is easier to attack a weakened version of somebody's argument than to attack the real version of that argument. So let's say I'm saying something that's quite nuanced and technical. Somebody could dumb that down into some really dumb statement and then attack that.
Right, so you're saying you've done your research and women are unhappy dominating men.
I didn't say they were unhappy dominating.
But you're saying that makes them unhappy, by and large.
I'm saying that no, I'm not saying that. And I actually haven't said that.
So you don't believe in equal pay?
No, I'm not saying that at all.
You basically saying women need to just accept they're never going to make it on equal terms.
No, I didn't
say that. If I was a young woman watching that, I would go, you're saying that women aren't intelligent enough to run these top companies?
No, I didn't say that at all.
You were saying that intelligence and conscientiousness by implication are not female traits.
No.
I mean, that's very dangerous territory.
I'm not saying that at all.
Are women less intelligent than men, by and large?
No, they're not.
The false dilemma fallacy. This one boils down an argument into one of two camps, one of two conclusions, and they are usually opposites. The reason why it is a fallacy is because there are often many shades of gray in between. So it would be like me saying you must be a Democrat or a Republican. You must be black or white, when in reality, there's many shades in between those two things.
What choices are we going to make to reach that goal? Either we ask the wealthiest Americans to pay their fair share in taxes, or we're going to have to ask seniors to pay more for Medicare.
The slippery slope fallacy. This one assumes that a step in a certain direction, a small step, will eventually lead to like a chain reaction of further events into some kind of exaggerated outcome. When you're young, your parents might have thrown this one at you quite a bit. It's like, well, don't do that, otherwise, you're going to end up a drug addict on the street, kind of thing. When in reality, one little step in a certain direction doesn't necessarily mean that you will continue down that path.
Okay, Stephen Baldwin, hi. You're against legalizing marijuana. Why?
Obviously, Joy, there's a lot of common sense that needs to be included in this conversation. It's a very simple reality. Marijuana leads to doing worse things. That's just a fact. I don't care what anybody says, what the debate is. When you smoke marijuana at a young age, it'll usually lead to alcohol abuse and harder drugs. So right there, that's one reason why it should not be legalized.
The circular argument fallacy. This one is when somebody's argument starts with what they're trying to prove in the end. Sort of like, the Bible is true because it says it's true. Or something like, you must obey the law because it is illegal to break the law. Essentially, the start and the end of the argument are the same thing, and it's like this endless circle of reasoning. You can never really escape the loop.
So for you, why do you put your faith in believing that one book?
Well, let's just start off with the fact that the Bible is true. All the others are not true. That's the biggest key. God is true, and His word that comes from Him is also true. That's kind of an easy way to answer that question. How do we know the Bible's true? By virtue of it coming from God, who is the truth.
The alphabet soup fallacy. So this one is kind of funny to see. It's when somebody assumes that the more big words, acronyms, abbreviations, or kind of like shop talk they use, the more knowledgeable they must be on the topic. It's sort of like you're not allowed to be really knowledgeable and smart about something unless you use all these big words. So you see this a lot in like academic circles. It kind of irritates me in a way because I'm of the belief that if you really know a topic well, you should be able to explain it to a child. And if you can only explain it to other academics, then really, do you really know your stuff? So alphabet soup fallacy is kind of one of my personal pet peeves.
What do you mean by God?
Part of the conception of God that underlies the Western ethos is the notion that whatever God is expressed in the truthful speech that rectifies pathological hierarchies. And that isn't all it does. It also confronts the chaos of being itself and generates habitable order. That's the metaphysical proposition, and that's best conceptualized as at least one element of God. And so I would think about it as a transcendent reality that's only observable across the longest of time frames, the longest of iterated time frames, to your point.
The bandwagon. So if you've ever had a parent ask you if you would jump off a bridge if your friends were all doing it, you basically had a parent that was trying to protect you from this fallacy. So the bandwagon says just because a large group of people are doing something or saying something, it doesn't make it true. So another word for this might be social proof. You know, the more people that believe something, for example, the more credible it appears. You know, if one person believes in some crazy religious idea, you know, it doesn't look very credible. But if 10,000 people all believe in it, all of a sudden people are like, maybe there's something to that. The red herring. A red herring is when you divert away from the actual issue and use information that sort of looks to be relevant, but in the end, it's not really relevant. It's sort of like word salad, and you see politicians especially doing this a lot. They could be asked a direct question in a debate, and yet they find ways to kind of talk around the issue, maybe bring up other things, but never really address the actual point. So that is a red herring.
What percentage of the government's debt is now owned by the Bank of Canada? What percentage?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, as the member opposite knows, our government is operating very much within the...
The question is, what percentage of our debt is owed to the Bank of Canada?
The Honourable Minister.
As I said, Mr. Speaker, Canada has the fiscal firepower to do what it needs to do. We have the lowest debt to GDP ratio.
How much has the bank printed this year to fund borrowing to the government?
The Honourable Minister.
As I said, Mr. Speaker, I really want to make clear tonight that an independent Bank of Canada is key to...
Question: how much has the Government of Canada borrowed from the Bank of Canada this year?
Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, it represents a profound misunderstanding of how the Canadian economy or...
Personal incredulity. This fallacy says that because something is hard to understand or it's complicated, that it's probably not true. I often see this presented in debates about evolution. So you have somebody that believes in evolution and maybe somebody that doesn't. And the person that doesn't believe in evolution will often use this fallacy to kind of say, well, evolution is probably not true because that just makes no sense. It's too complicated, right? But that person has never really taken the time to study the science, you know, and a lot of these things, for example, might have really complicated science. So it's almost like in order to truly understand it, you'd have to do a degree in biology or even further, chemistry, biochemistry, and truly dive into these topics before you could even say whether something was valid. But these people choose to do no research and instead, wow, that just sounds so unlikely and complicated. I'm going to choose not to believe that, and that is false.
I'll tell you why it's not a scam, in my opinion. All right? Tide goes in, tide goes out. Never a miscommunication. You can't explain that. You can explain why the tide goes in.
Tide goes in, tide goes out.
See, the water, the tide comes in and it goes out, Mr. Silverman.
Maybe
it
always comes in on top of Mount Olympus, who's making the tides go in and out.
No, but the false cause fallacy. This is one of my favorite fallacies, and you see it a lot in sort of health circles or alternative medicine circles. It basically says that if B occurred after A, that A caused B. So an example of this might be, I started to feel a little bit sick, I had a cold, so I quickly went and drank 8 glasses of water, you know, every morning until the cold went away. And then you assume that drinking 8 glasses of water every single morning gets rid of your cold. Obviously, there's lots of extreme examples of this. People make all kinds of claims all the time. They might eat something or take something and then something happens. And it's sort of this evidence that doesn't really prove something is true. Other things like examples of prayer working often have this. Well, I prayed that my cold would go away and my cold went away, therefore prayer works.
Which was my youngest daughter's diagnosed with cystic fibrosis. And so she was struggling a lot with a lot of seasonal threats and different issues that were just making me just feel overwhelmed. And I was introduced to an essential oil called Breathe, and I just started using it one day. putting it on her chest. A few months later, it dawned on me that she was better.
The hasty generalization. So this one is the basis of a lot of prejudice, things like racism. And it basically says, if you look at the actions of an individual or a small group, you can then assign that to the larger group. So an example of this might be, let's say your friend had a golden retriever and that golden retriever was aggressive. If you use the hasty generalization fallacy, you would say all golden retrievers must be aggressive, which obviously is not true because golden retrievers are nice. So the last one I'm going to talk about is the fallacy, and I thought it was appropriate because it basically says just because somebody used a logical fallacy in their argument does not necessarily mean that their argument is false. So let's say somebody used the false cause fallacy and said, I drank some orange juice and then my cold went away. You can't necessarily say that it's not true because it's still possible that the orange juice got rid of the cold, but you can't definitively say it. So you can't say it's false, but you also can't say it's true. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching. Hope you got something out of this. If you like this video, hit the thumbs up button and leave me a comment with your favorite fallacy, even if it's one not on my list. Like I said, there's hundreds of them. I think it can be really healthy to learn about these fallacies. For one, to avoid using them in our own lives, but also to identify when other people's arguments are not valid. Thanks for watching, and I hope you have a great day. Bye.
Excellent video. Fantastic. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. Like he said, there are hundreds of fallacies. Just need to be willing to dig into them.
Hey guys, well.
No. Okay. There is a logical fallacy handout on Blackboard. I've given you a list, I believe it's like 9 pages long, of logical fallacies to be guarding yourself against, and making sure that you're not using them yourself, or maybe you do want to use them on purpose because people don't think for themselves. I mean, why not, right? If you can get away with it, if you want to be that individual. But also to be able to recognize them when they are being done to you is a great idea. I have this poster hanging on the wall in my office. I absolutely love it. I think it's fantastic. But you're welcome to come by and read it sometime, or you can look this up for yourself. It's good stuff. All right, so moving on. Let's talk about disinformation. When something that you have to say goes against the narrative, it's often called disinformation. So here we have an article. New York Post says, Jeff Bezos asked the disinformation board to fact check the Biden tweet. So here's Joe Biden's tweet. You want to bring down inflation? Let's make sure the wealthiest corporations pay their fair share. Jeff Bezos, the owner of Amazon, responds, the newly created disinformation board should review this tweet, or maybe they need to form a new non sequitur board instead. Raising corporate taxes is fine to discuss. Taming inflation is critical to discuss. Pushing them together is misdirection, which is non sequitur. When the conclusion does not follow from the premises, in more informal reasoning, it can be when what is presented as evidence or reason is irrelevant or adds very little support to the conclusion. So we have here evidence of non sequitur happening and being called out. Now, I noticed down here on the slide that there's some of the language is in a font that we can't read, but I think we're going to be okay. We can move forward. So we do need to be watching out for disinformation, but we also need to be watching out when other people tell us something is disinformation. You should question that rather than just going, oh, okay. You should say, okay, I hear what you're saying, but I'm going to look for myself. I'm going to dig in for myself. I'm going to do my own research. Thank you very much. Now, here's a fun little thing that happened in the last couple of years. Oh, well, we're working to it. So let's talk about what is disinformation. The Google definition, false information which is intended to mislead, especially propaganda issued by a government organization or a power or the media. That's funny. A funny definition. So, last year, our government created the Disinformation Governance Board. You may not have known that this happened. Oh, I did. I paid attention. Here's what CBS News reported. The new board is intended to standardize the department's efforts to respond to disinformation that could be connected with violent threats to the U.S. So, if an agency under the Department of Homeland Security, like a Federal Emergency Management Agency, U.S. Customs and Border Protection, or Cybersecurity Information Security Agency, identifies disinformation under its purview, it's the new Disinformation Board that would come up with the best practices for any DHS agency handling this disinformation. So any information that any of the federal government departments deem as against their agenda is going to be this disinformation. It has no charter. Now, I'm going to say had. I need to change the verbs here. Had. It had no charter and no parameters set. Republicans and Democrats were both concerned. Because here's the thing, right? So let's say the Democrats put this in place, right? They're so excited because that means all their Republican cohorts are going to be silenced, right? Because, oh, that's disinformation. It goes against what we teach. It's disinformation. So then, as it does in the United States, power does change hands because that's the way our government is set up. Just read history, read the Constitution for yourself, take a government class. So then when the Republicans take back power, because that will happen at some point in time, then the Democrats are going to be subjected to this disinformation board. And so anything that they have to say that goes against what the Republicans believe, the Republicans can say, oh, disinformation, we strike it from the record. Is that true argument? Is that participating in fair and equal treatment? No, and it straight up goes against the First Amendment to the United States Constitution. So trippy that this actually happened. Nina Jankowicz, to name a few things found in researching her background in person, who was once an advisor to Ukraine, called Elon Musk a free speech absolutist. Like that's a bad thing. She's trying to say mean things about Elon Musk and call him an absolutist for free speech. Down with Elon Musk. What, because he wants everyone to have a voice? She once sang about having sex with a dead minor Harry Potter in a bathroom, as well as other ghosts, denied the truth of Hunter Biden's laptop in legal settings, calls herself the Mary Poppins of disinformation, was the head of the Disinformation Governance Board. Was. She's not anymore. Has anyone read the book 1984 by George Orwell? If you haven't, you should. Like, part of me wants to start making that a part of the curriculum. Everyone should read 1984 by George Orwell and then look around at the world that we're living in and what people are trying to do. And you'll go, oh, thought police, much. So the Disinformation Governance Board is no longer a thing. It did not last. I don't know what Nina Jankowicz is up to now. Probably singing about a dead minor Harry Potter again. But anyway, back to this. That might have been a little bit of a logical fallacy because I don't really know. My little halo on my head, and I'm just going to smile. What other countries in this world have had a Ministry of Truth or a disinformation board? So in 1984, it's called a Ministry of Truth. But it's a disinformation board. What other countries around the globe have had that? Hitler, Stalin, North Korea, China, Russia, Venezuela, and what other countries where you do not have the right to speak your opinion, that what is right is determined by your government? Does that sound like a fun place to live? I mean, I'm asking. It's something to consider. Also, what gets me about this is one political party pushes the idea of a disinformation board because it will silence those in opposition to them. But when the political tide turns, because it always does, it's how our government is set up, learn civics, y'all. When the political tide turns, those same people in that political party that pushed for the disinformation board will cry about how unfair it is that their voices are no longer allowed when they're no longer in power. It's crazy. And you know why the government tries to get away with this kind of thing? Because we don't know that it is we, the people, who actually run this country. The Constitution is yours, and it's mine. It's our document. It doesn't just belong to the government. It belongs to us. And those Bill of Rights are there to protect you from the government. Again, take a government class, learn about this. The Bill of Rights is to protect you from the government. So the government in the United States can't take over and tell us what we can and can't say, what we can and can't do. It's like siblings fighting to choose what TV show the family watches every evening. So full of tactics, selfishness, and it often turns to violence. I'm a mom, been there. It's exhausting research and experience. That's what Democrats and Republicans are like. They're like siblings who just refuse to get along. They refuse to have a conversation. They refuse to try to see things from the opposing perspective. They refuse to talk to one another. And so they fight. And then they want to drag the rest of us into it. And they want to do things like create the disinformation board so that we can silence everybody else. That goes against the First Amendment. Done. Move on. Conversation needs to happen elsewhere. So how to argue with someone who won't listen? You are going to come across cognitive dissonance. People who are just set in their ideas, they're not going to listen to you no matter how much logic you present, no matter how many facts or statistics that you have, they are not going to listen to you. Cognitive dissonance is a mental conflict when your beliefs don't align with your actions. It's uncomfortable when someone has contradictory values, attitudes, or perspectives about the same thing. Cognitive dissonance is when someone will not listen to you despite logic. Here are 7 tells that you're talking with someone who is in cognitive dissonance, and how to proceed in true argument, if you can, with that person. Okay, I'm going to play this video for you. Once it begins, these are how to recognize cognitive dissonance.
It seems to be harder than ever to get through to people logically. In fact, some of the smartest people have the most sophisticated psychological booby traps when it comes to heated subjects. So in this video, we are going to break down why sometimes people won't listen to reason even when they're smart, and what techniques you can do to finally get through to those people so that they see the light. The first thing that you need to realize is that people can fall into a pit that makes them impervious to reasoned argument. What pushes them into that pit is called cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is the state of having thoughts, actions, beliefs, or desires that are inconsistent with one another. The classic example is someone who smokes, knows that smoking kills, yet says that they want to live a long, healthy life. Their beliefs and their actions don't seem to match up. Now, having one's own cognitive dissonance pointed out is uncomfortable. That's because there's often an unspoken cost to changing certain actions or opinions. In this case, stopping smoking would lead to painful withdrawals. So the most common way that people make cognitive dissonance more bearable is by sneakily changing another thought or action, even if that one makes them irrational. That means that our smoker who can't quit only has irrational paths out of cognitive dissonance. They may point to individuals who smoked without consequence, insist that they have the healthiest genes, or say that they don't care if they die early, even when they really do. The big takeaway is that sometimes, especially in politics, religion, or emotional life choices, the most ridiculous belief that we have is the one that is most difficult to change. That is is why smart people cling to silly positions. It's also why it's critical that you recognize cognitive dissonance if you're ever going to get through to those people. Because the worst thing that you can do in moments where people are deep in a cognitive dissonance shutdown is to continue with logical argument. That will just drive them deeper into irrationality. So here are 7 tells that someone is going into a cognitive dissonance shutdown, and you need to tread carefully. Keep in mind that none of these are perfect indicators. There are times when each tell is entirely reasonable. But if you see several tells, it's likely you're encountering cognitive dissonance. Also, my intent here is not to make fun of the people in these examples, just to learn from them, because we all get caught up in cognitive dissonance from time to time. So the first indicator is being stunned by new information without conceding or adjusting your perspective. Take, for example, Kathy Newman after she had asked Jordan Peterson about why he feels that he has the right to offend people in the pursuit of truth.
You're doing what you should do, which is digging a bit to see what the hell's going on.
So
exercising your freedom of speech to certainly risk offending me.
So you haven't sat there and I'm just trying to work that out. I mean,
Gotcha.
You have got me. I'm trying to work that through in my head. Yeah, it took a while.
It did.
When someone is stunned, it means that they encountered surprising new information, and to not adjust one's perspective based on that new information can point towards cognitive dissonance. But I repeat that alone is not enough on its own, which is why you should pay attention for number 2, being unable to accurately summarize the other side's perspective. And this is often preceded by, "so you're saying."
You're saying that trans activists, but you're saying, right, so you're saying that anyone who believes in equality, so you're saying give people equality of opportunity, that's fine.
We see Ben Affleck do this in his conversation with Sam Harris when Sam is critical of aspects of the doctrine of Islam.
We have been sold this meme of Islamophobia where every criticism of the doctrine of Islam gets conflated with bigotry toward Muslims as people.
Right. You're saying that Islamophobia is not a real thing.
Now, this needs to be contrasted with summarizing the other side's perspective in a way that genuinely attempts to portray them in their own words. This is to be encouraged, and you can see Jon Stewart do it here with Bill O'Reilly.
Let me go to a different point, if I may. It sounds like what you're saying is, and correct me if I'm wrong, and I don't want to be wrong when I'm with you, because you know I got mad love for you. That's a rap phrase.
I got it.
All right.
The third tell is mind reading the other side's intent, especially when the intent is presumed to be nefarious. Ben Shapiro made this mistake in his conversation with Andrew Neil, assuming that Andrew must be on the left because he asked him pointed questions. Ben continued to disbelieve Andrew even when Andrew had indicated that Ben had misread his intent.
You as a journalist are proceeding to call one side of the political aisle ignorant, barbaric, and sending us back to the Dark Ages. Why don't you just say that you're on the left? Is this so hard for you? Why can't you just be honest?
Mr.
Seriously,
Shapiro,
it's a serious question.
Mr. Shapiro, if you only knew how ridiculous that statement is, you wouldn't have said it. So let's move on. Would you vote
I
for
think it's pretty
Mr.
evident from your own questions exactly what you are, sir.
Trump?
The fourth tell is regularly moving goalposts. It's of course okay to clarify your position, but if you notice that someone is regularly adjusting the criteria by which they judge an argument, you're likely witnessing cognitive dissonance. For context, in this next clip, Stewart and O'Reilly are arguing whether it reflects poorly that Barack Obama had Common to the White House, given that Common has defended someone accused of killing a police officer. Jon Stewart points out that Springsteen, Bono, and Bob Dylan also did the same thing, and we get this exchange.
No, wait, let me reply. Okay, so you say that because Bono, Springsteen, and Bob Dylan wrote songs defending people who were accused of heinous things, that I have to give Common a pass because he did the same thing.
You have to be consistent with your outrage.
Let me give you...
Be consistent.
I will. Common visited, went to see...
The fifth tell is yelling or getting angry, especially self-righteous anger. And you just saw it with Bill O'Reilly a bit, but here's another example from Ben Affleck and Sam Harris. For context, while Ben does make good points that most Muslims are good human beings, he's not responding to Sam's criticisms at all. You can hear Sam try to explain his actual position, but he can't get through because of the yelling.
How about the more than 1 billion people who aren't fanatical, who don't punish women, who just want to go to the store, wait a second. Wait a second. Don't do any of the things that you're saying all Muslims.
Wait a second.
Stereotyping. Wait a second. Things, and you painting the whole group religion with that.
Let's.
The sixth tell of cognitive dissonance is attacking someone's character instead of addressing their arguments, and it's often a sign in light of a losing argument. This is a last resort.
Who you are in terms of your group identity.
You're just
That's
saying these
murderous.
things, though, to provoke, aren't you? I mean,
Not
you
a
are a
bit.
provocateur.
I never said
You're like
anything.
the alt-right that you hate to be compared to. You want to stir things up.
And 7 is retreating from a point without any concession. This is the least of the giveaway, since there's often good reasons to move on in an argument, but it should be noted nonetheless, especially if someone retreats rather hastily to move along.
For
You don't
humor,
set out to
now
provoke.
and then, I'm not interested in provoking.
But what
Not in
about the thing
least.
about, fighting and the lobster? Tell us about the lobster.
Well, that's quite a segue.
If you see 2, 3, or more of these signs, stop debating. Stop with logical arguments because they will not get you anywhere. You are in the midst of dangerous cognitive dissonance. Instead, your first order of business should be to re-establish rapport with the person you're communicating with. We've covered this at length in our videos on Crowder and Trevor Noah, which I'll link to for a thorough breakdown of rapport, but for the fastest effect, mid-conversation, crack a joke that does not insult the other side, like this.
This is kind of fun, though, is it not?
It's delightful.
And my frustration is not with you. Again, it's watching the entire system.
I know. You
in
loathe
action.
the network, but you kind of loathe me a little less. I got it.
No, I don't even loathe
Let's
you
talk
at all.
politics.
I actually enjoy your company. I feel like we should get together outside of this weirdly egg-shaped table.
Good-natured jokes are especially effective because cognitive dissonance is like a shell that prevents new information from coming in. As long as you are perceived as a threat, the other person's shell will stay up. But if you signal that you're not a threat by making someone laugh, they will feel safe enough to finally open back up. Once the other side has opened back up, you're going to have to employ 3 counterintuitive mindsets to finally get them to listen. First, demonstrate no superiority if they switch to your side. When you rub winning an argument in people's faces, they will slip back into cognitive dissonance. If your aim is to change someone's mind, you need to resist the urge to do things like this.
You talk a lot about the Pareto distribution, yes?
That doesn't mean I defend it.
Well, okay.
No, not well,
Yes.
okay.
Yes.
Second, do not force people to immediately live out their new values. Our hypothetical smoker is going to have a really hard time conceding that smoking is ruining their health if they're forced to quit cold turkey in that same breath. So you need to allow people space to separate honesty from integrity. Third, do not hold past inconsistencies against people. People have a strong desire to defend things that they've said and done in the past. So when you bring up those inconsistencies, it can drive them to abandon the new belief that they're trying out just so that they can remain consistent with their past selves. But all of this stuff is worth only so much if you use it just with conversation with others. Because the most dangerous cognitive dissonance you will ever encounter is your own. Your cognitive dissonance is what makes you the smart person with some dumb opinions, and we all have some. Now, admittedly, spotting cognitive dissonance in yourself is harder, though the 7 tells can tip you off if you have super high self-awareness. And the solution of allowing yourself to crack a joke, forgive your past inconsistencies, will help you move through cognitive dissonance gracefully. But there is one more piece that helps the most with your own person, and that's when you feel yourself losing track of an argument, you start to raise your voice, or you just get the sense that you're trying to win instead of learn or communicate, connect with your body. Literally, look downward into your chest, placing a hand on your heart or belly, and take a deep breath. Cognitive dissonance often feels like panic if you tune into it, which is why people enter fight or flight in those arguments. But when you slow down and you pay attention, you'll find that you're actually just having a discussion and exploring a perspective that may be more in line with reality, and your sense of logic will start to come back to you. Now, if you can do this in real time, you won't just be part of the solution to communication breakdowns, which is amazing in and of itself. You will see things that other people cannot see. You'll take your ego blinders off and be better prepared to succeed in politics, relationships, work, or life. If you don't do this, you'll find yourself in a near perpetual state of shock and outrage when the world doesn't match your predefined expectations, and worse, you'll be poorly equipped to do anything to improve it. Thanks to our sponsor for this video, Audible. Audible is having a special holiday offer.
Go ahead and stop it there. Excellent video that is called The Most Dangerous Cognitive Dissonance. That would be a fun one for you to look up and then go down the rabbit hole. You can see they've got a lot of other videos. It's actually Charisma on Command channel. And that video, why nobody uses logic and arguments anymore. And then down there it says The Most Dangerous Cognitive Dissonance. So Charisma on Command, I would highly recommend that you look up that channel on YouTube and go down that
Offer where you
rabbit
can get
hole.
6 months.
Watch some of their videos. learn to be a critical thinker, and that's a good resource for you outside of just what we're doing in this class. Know that there's always something behind the words that people say. Dig into logos, pathos, and ethos. Look for logical fallacies because they are everywhere. Recognize cognitive dissonance. Show deeper understanding. Find the aim, the author, the speaker's intended meaning. Always be asking, what's really going on here? What really is the message? What am I truly looking at? More regarding how to think critically, I found an article called 5 Questions to Improve Your Critical Thinking Skills. You can click on this link. It is under handouts. You can find it there as well. I'm going to go ahead and go past that. But here is the information in a nutshell from that article. There are 5 key questions that we can ask in order to analyze an argument. The first 3 will help us understand the structure of an argument. The last 2 will help us further evaluate the quality of the argument. And the questions are as follows. What are the issue and the conclusion? What are the reasons? What are the assumptions? Are there any fallacies in the reasoning? And how good is the evidence? Again, we're getting more questions that we can ask when we encounter a message. 8 key questions says me. So I took it from 5. I'm going to make it 8. What are the issue and the conclusion? Who is the author? What is the context, the world, and its author? What are the reasons? Logos, pathos, ethos. How good is the evidence? Logos, pathos, ethos. What are the assumptions and biases? That deals with the reader and the speaker. Are there any fallacies in the reasoning? How is the argument structured? Literary elements. Strong questions. Good questions to be asking when you encounter an argument. Yes, literary elements. All right. A literary analysis explains what a work of literature means and how it means it. On Blackboard, now here's just some information on literary elements, a couple of links for you. But also, on Blackboard, I have given you a 15-page comprehensive list of literary elements. So you can find other sources for your worksheet, other literary elements to be looking at beyond setting, character, conflict, irony, and flashback, personification, the basics. You can find others to look up and to dig in, and so you can analyze a reading or an argument. Why critically thinking? How does that work? Why critically think? That's exactly what it says. Literature does not merely entertain. It also intends to shape the outlook of readers. Therefore, an argument does not intend to serve only as an introduction, but attract the reader's focus to an issue that will be made clear gradually. Because we're talking about literature specifically. And every day we use different arguments in our discussions to convince others to accept our viewpoints. We do it the same way in literature, meaning we state what we believe is true, and then we gradually build an argument around it to make others believe it is true as well. Literature at face value may be seen as a tool to entertain us, with attractive verse, with sweet melody, or with a story with instances of humor or emotion displayed by interesting characters. However, this is not its ultimate aim. Writers consider literature as a powerful tool in their hands to shape or reform our thinking. Arguments come into play at this time. Writers carefully play with words, as well as giving reasons and examples to persuade us to their point of view. Our outlook is molded by words that entertain us. What a thought. And it is true. Stories, movies, TV shows. We are molded by the creators of all of these things. Our ideas are formed and formulated by the creators of stories who have done this with the specific intent of molding you. Every story ever composed written, put on screen, has a reason behind it. We have to stop and think about that. We have to recognize we are molded by that which entertains us. Think. Please think. So I have questions. Do you like being told what to do, where to go, what to eat, how to live, what to believe? Do you like those things? Most of us are going to say no. Well, those are interesting questions to lead us into the reading of The Lottery by Shirley Jackson. So at this point, I'm going to be drawing this to a close. I am going to let you journey into the lottery on your own. In the PowerPoint, there is a link to the audiobook, but you can also go on YouTube and type in The Lottery audiobook, and you'll find many different versions. The one that I have here for you is read by Shirley Jackson herself. And I think this link might actually not work when we click it. So you can go on YouTube and type in The Lottery by Shirley Jackson, read by Shirley Jackson, or audiobook by Shirley Jackson, and you will find it actually read in her voice, which is a super interesting thing because then you're getting the author's tone and the author's inflection. So you will see what she emphasizes that maybe some other reader did not. When you have finished reading and maybe listening to the audiobook, you will then work your way through your questions. All right. Also in the PowerPoint, I have included a movie. This is the link to the movie. It's just a few slides back. We have some information in here about Shirley Jackson. I'm not going to read all of this to you, but you can read through it yourself and learn some interesting things about her. I found all of this online in a quick study of Shirley Jackson. Very interesting woman. Here is the movie, but you can also find this on YouTube again. Just type in The Lottery 1969 and you'll find the short film. It is one of the best adaptations I've seen, where it literally is the story. They take it word for word out of the text. It's very well done. Very well done. 1969 of all times. So your homework will be to complete that, to go through the story and then answer the questions. And I'll be able to tell by your answers if you actually have read or been through the story. So make sure that you do. It is an excellent story. So with that, we're going to draw week 3's video lecture to a close. Again, if you have any questions, you know what to do. You're going to send me a text message and ask away. All right, with that, I'm going to say have a wonderful week.